Hello! Welcome to the second episode of When Animals Attack. I'm Jen.
And I'm Nilo.
And we're here to talk to you about shark attacks today. It is the 30th anniversary of Shark Week, the Discovery Channel's crown jewel. So we're going to dedicate 2 episodes in a row to shark attacks. We're going to start with the great white because they have the biggest, baddest reputation. And next week, I don't know, maybe you said something about tiger sharks or bull sharks, or we could do like a shark amalgam of some sort.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So this topic hits a little close to home for us because we're both surfers and we surf together. We try to get out there like once a week. And of course, whenever you enter the ocean, you're entering the shark's territory. So you have to respect that. Nilo, have you ever seen or encountered a shark in the wild?
Absolutely not.
No?
I'm so happy about it too. Yeah.
I've had a few shark encounters, but not scary ones. I've gone swimming with leopard sharks down in San Diego. Anyone who's in Southern California, you can do that. This is the time of year for it. They're pretty small, they're harmless, and all you need is like a snorkel, and it's right off the coast if you look up where to go. And they're really cool. They just swim all around you and whatever. And they're small, but I've also swum with the biggest fish in the sea. The biggest shark is not actually the great white, it is the whale shark. They are bigger by kind of a lot. So great whites, the biggest one on record, I think is like 20 feet. Whale sharks can get upwards of 30 feet, but they're totally harmless. They feed like whales, you know, they're filter feeders. They just open their mouths and fish swim in. But yeah, I did that off the coast of Isla Holbox, off the Yucatan Peninsula last summer, and it was really cool. Like, we went out in this boat and you just jump in the water with some fins and a snorkel, and you just have to try to swim as fast as you can to keep up with them.
Cool.
And it's regulated to not bother the sharks, so you can only, like, each boat can only spend, I think, a half hour near any given shark. So they don't overwhelm them, and you can't have more than 3 boats in the same place and whatever. So yeah, at one point, Andrew, my partner, was with me and was taking video, like on the other side of the shark, trying to shoot me. And I don't know, he did something that caused the shark to change direction abruptly right toward me.
Oh my God.
So I had nowhere to go. Like, I was only a few feet away from the shark. I was right next to it. So it essentially just went under me. And because it swims really close to the surface too, what happened was it actually kind of lifted me up for a second with its head by the torso. Like, it kind of nudged me, and then I could feel its fins as they went under me.
How'd that feel?
Sandpapery, but pretty cool. It was actually really magical. It kind of felt like getting a nice warm hug from the ocean.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so obviously neither of those was scary. The only remotely relevant encounter I've had, I guess, was last summer at San Onofre, where we still have to go at some point.
Yeah.
They made all the surfers evacuate because there was a helicopter. There had been great white sightings around that area, and so they made all of us leave the water because 2 great whites were spotted near the lineup of surfers.
Oh.
So, I don't know. Honestly, I wanted to stay and see it because I'm perverse, I guess. But I left, and then I actually had a shark floaty with me. It's like the kind that you ride. That's clearly designed for children, but I have one. I call him Sharky Shark. And I went back in the water after like 5 minutes or something when it seemed like nothing was happening, and I didn't go that far out. I was just like a couple feet in to ride the shark. And as I was coming out, this guy tells his kid, "Look, there it is. She caught the shark."
Aw, that's pretty cute.
It was cute.
Yeah, that's adorable.
Yeah. So anyway, nothing scary. I guess as surfers, we always have to be aware of the possibility of a shark attack, but how often do you even think about it when we're out there?
I don't ever think about it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not on my mind at all.
Yeah,
Maybe it should be.
maybe. But I don't know. As we'll discuss, our odds of being attacked are incredibly low. So I think it's best that we don't think about it and just enjoy our time out there.
Yeah, there's plenty of surfers that have not been attacked, and they're out there every day.
Yeah, really almost all of them. So do you want to start us off with a recent shark attack story?
Yeah, just a couple of days ago, or yesterday even, there was an incident with two different children. It's unclear whether or not these children were related, but off the coast of Long Island, which it's very rare for there to be any shark sightings over there apparently, near Fire Island at a beach called like Sailor's Haven, there was an unidentified shark that attacked a 12-year-old girl, and she was just kind of like, she was close to the water, like, not that far in, offshore. And the gashes on her leg, I mean, she could walk away from the incident.
Okay.
And then shortly thereafter, presumably the same animal did the same thing to a 13-year-old boy.
Oh.
Yeah, and but with this 13-year-old boy, it left a remnant of a tooth in the gash. So
Evidence.
exactly. So that evidence was sent off to somewhere in New York, and it just looked up that it was confirmed that it was indeed a shark, but they still don't know what kind of shark.
Oh, okay.
And so that's kind of interesting to think about there being sharks in an area where they've been typically not seen.
Yeah, I know that some of the most famous shark attacks, the ones that inspired Jaws, happened off the coast of New Jersey way back in 1916. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, I think other than that, it's pretty unusual.
Yeah, so that was recent. That's very recent.
Yeah. So I assume it's like a small shark, though, right?
Yeah, from what from the gashes, it's definitely not like a great white. It's some
Okay.
sort of a smaller shark,
Interesting.
probably hunting for something else, and they called it a case of mistaken identity.
Yeah, I guess that's what is typically assumed, that sharks
Yeah.
aren't ever intentionally trying to eat people.
Right.
We're not typically fatty enough for them anyway. They
Yeah,
prefer seals, sea lions,
And
fish.
we eat garbage food. We're not.
We're not very nutritious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair point. All right. Well, my story this week is a lot older than that. And I'm going to call it Fox's Wild Ride. You'll see why. So it begins with a spearfishing competition in 1961
It's great.
at a place called Aldinga Beach. I may not be pronouncing that right, but anyway, it's in South Australia. And this guy, Brian Roger, was attacked by a great white shark as he was headed back to shore with his catch toward the end of the competition. So he had all the fish he'd caught, was just heading in, and then he saw these two really large kingfish, each one weighing probably about 50 pounds, go racing past him. And all he could think was like, oh shit, that it would be good to catch one of them. Then I'd definitely win the competition. But it didn't occur to him that they might be fleeing from something even larger. A second later, something enormous had seized him by the hip and leg and then shook him like a dog with a toy. Possibly attracted by the fish blood trailing from his catch, a great white had decided to see what Roger tasted like. He noticed a giant black eye and tried to stick his thumb into it.
Oh my God.
But unfortunately, he missed, and his arm was cut to the bone as it brushed the shark's teeth instead.
Jesus.
But the shark did let go and came back for him almost immediately, but this time he was ready with his spear gun out. So he shot the shark, and he got it, but it promptly shook off that annoyance, and he was afraid it was going to come back for him, but it didn't. It actually decided, I guess, he was not worth the trouble and just swam away. So as he was swimming toward shore and rescue, another competitor, this guy named Rodney Fox, found himself being circled by a shark, maybe the same one, nobody knows. But each time it approached him, he dove to the bottom to evade it. He did this over and over again for more than 10 minutes as he inched his way back to shore and was able to emerge a little shaken but unharmed. So that's just the backdrop. 2 years later, during the same competition, the same beach, the same guy who'd been followed but not attacked by a shark was about to have the ride of his life. Rodney Fox was favored to win this year's competition, and the organizers had maybe learned from their mistakes and decided to provide each fisherman with a plastic ball thingy to hold their catch to try to avoid the smell of blood in the water. It did not work out as they'd hoped, though. Fox was in the lead, and once again, the competition was almost over when he noticed what he'd later describe as a silence, a perceptible hush all around him. Then, suddenly, he was hit hard and pushed sideways, face down through the water. So the shark keeps on swimming. It's bit him around the waist and is like pushing him through the water, face down. He felt what he called a queer sensation, as though all my insides were squeezed over to one side. And that's pretty much what was happening. This great white had him sort of from armpit to butt, and its teeth were digging in and presumably actually pushing his organs over. And then, kind of without warning, the shark let go. Fox instinctively tried to push it away with his hand, but like Roger before him, he kind of missed and accidentally reached into the shark's mouth. So his arm was flayed as he pulled it back. And kind of as soon as he was free for a minute, he just was hit with the pain. Up until that moment, it had just been surprise and that kind of weird squished feeling, but suddenly he was just in terrible pain. But he knew he was still in grave danger. He was actually still underwater at this point, and the air had been crushed out of his lungs by the shark, so he was pretty close to drowning. So he tries to kick his way up to the surface, and as he's doing that, his flippers keep flapping against the shark, so he knows that it's following him up there.
Oh my God.
And as he surfaced, he felt its sandpapery skin as it kind of slid past him. This is where it gets really crazy. So, aware that the shark was at least considering continuing the attack, Fox did the only thing he could think of to avoid being bitten again. And apparently that was to hug the shark. So he wrapped his arms around its body, literally rode the shark to the bottom of the ocean. And the shark was not into that at all. And so when it got to the bottom, it just kind of like scraped him off against the rocks. So he had to make his way back to the surface again. And when he did, he saw that the water around him was just completely red with his blood. And then a cone emerged, covered in his blood as well, as like red cone, which was the shark's head. It comes rushing toward him, and he thought, that's it.
Yeah.
It's over, because he had no fight left in him, nothing left to give, so he just kind of waited for the impact. But inexplicably, it veered away. It didn't hit him. And the ball that was holding his catch was still floating near him, and the shark just turned to that and swallowed it whole before taking off. But Fox's ordeal was not yet over, because as the shark sped off, it took him with it. His catch was still attached to him by a leash that was attached to a belt around his waist, and the shark had that in his mouth. So once again, he's taking a wild shark ride. He can't find the clip, so he can't unhook it. And one of his arms just wasn't working, the one that had been flayed. So his frantic attempts to unclip himself were all failing. And he thought, all right, so now this is how I'm going to die. And just as his lungs were about to burst, the leash just broke, probably from having been damaged at some point during the attack. So he swam to the surface and was rescued by a nearby boat. So both of these guys were incredibly lucky. He had some serious injuries. In the end, the shark had punctured both of his lungs, shattered his ribs, and, there were just countless flesh wounds as well. But 462 stitches and some physical therapy later, both he and the other guy, Roger, were on the South Australian team that won the national spearfishing title the very next year.
He continued to do his thing. Yeah.
Fucking crazy, right?
Yeah, that's wild that he didn't abandon.
Well, all of it's insane. I guess nobody can verify that he actually rode the shark.
Yeah, sure.
It's a pretty weird thing to make up, though.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I don't know.
It's pretty weird. It is pretty weird.
It's like Shark Dundee.
Yeah, hugging a shark down to the base of the ocean. That sounds pretty terrifying.
Yeah. I think one of the things that probably helped him, aside from his general fighting spirit and, creativity in hugging the shark, is that great whites actually seem to behave a little differently from some other kinds of sharks. Although they're the largest species to pose a danger to humans in the water, they're also more likely than, say, a bull shark to make an exploratory bite and then just back off. They seem to, as you were saying, test out what they're biting. Their mouths are really sensitive, their teeth, and their bodies, their skin. The reason it's so rough is it's actually made up of essentially tons of little teeth. It's like these little points made out of dentine filled with pulp, just like teeth, and covered with something like enamel.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're not quite as hard as the teeth in their mouths, but it's just as sensitive. So sometimes some researchers believe that one of the reasons they seem to do that bump thing where they just brush past people, they think it might be intentional as a way to kind of feel. And also, if they do that and the thing bleeds, then they know that it might be worth fighting. So they kind of feel you out by brushing against you or taking a little nip. And unfortunately, for us, their mouths are huge and our bodies are fragile, so those nips do a fair amount of damage. But yeah, so it seems, I was looking up statistics in the International Shark Attack File, and it seems like although great whites are attributed with the most attacks, partly because it's really difficult to tell them apart from other species like bull sharks. So a lot of people think there's really no way to tell which species are doing it. But anyway, they kill their victims much less often than bull sharks or tiger sharks. And it seems like they are more willing to do that one bite and then just kind of leave. I read, this is pretty creepy, some people have described the great whites, quote, cat-like curiosity. Some survivors or observers of attacks have described the shark just kind of watching with its head sticking out of the water. You can see the eye.
Yeah,
and
the eye.
Maybe following, but not continuing the attack. Like they're just like, let's see how this plays out after they've bitten someone.
Yeah, I feel like the eye in a lot of Jaws films or any other shark movie is pretty dominant in the narrative or the storytelling.
Yeah, they definitely do not have eyes that humans can relate to. If the eyes are the window to the soul, these are just big, black, empty pits of death and despair or something. I sound like Werner Herzog. So anyway, we'll put up some pictures on our Instagram at When Animals Attack Podcast. We did that for the first episode as well, but there are some pretty good shots that I found of Fox's scars, so you can see just how extensive the damage was. They're not too gruesome or anything.
But that's cool. I want to see that.
Yeah.
So that happened in 1917.
No, this was 1963. The second
63.
attack.
Oh.
The 1916 was the New Jersey one that inspired Jaws. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was just like a series of attacks over the course of several weeks that were not all in the same place, but it was just like no one had been attacked in that area, and then all of a sudden people kept getting attacked. So who knows? Maybe that's about to happen again.
Probably with climate change.
Yeah, well, actually, no. Overfishing and climate change are absolutely to blame for increases in shark attacks. That and the fact that people are more likely to be in the water nowadays. But, yeah. Are we ready for a shark attack movie recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, so sharks on film, of course, all have to contend with the weight of Jaws, possibly the most famous animal attack movie of all time. So I'm not going to bother telling listeners about that one because it does not need an introduction. But I'm going to make two brief recommendations that are both related to Jaws in some way. So can I take a second to just say that most lists of animal attack stories are total garbage? I was looking up shark movies to watch some over the last week, and every list out there is so lazy. I don't know if they're just designed to be clickbait by people who don't know what the hell they're talking about or what, but yeah, it's like all of these terrible CGI Sharknado ripoffs that people are listing when there are legit amazing films like The Last Shark out there that they could be watching instead. So if you want to go the Sharknado route, you're in luck. There are a million shitty options, from Spring Break Shark Attack to, Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus and whatever. And they're all terrible. And I think mostly not in the so bad they're good category of terrible. I think they're like trying too hard to be funny, and so they fail for me. But if you want a bad movie with some heart, look no further than The Last Shark or Jaws: The Revenge, which is a sequel I'll talk about after that. So The Last Shark, aka Great White, is an Italian film from 1981 that's clearly just trying to capitalize on the success of Jaws and really follows the storyline kind of point for point. But instead of just a shark attacking on normal beach days or whatever, it all takes place during this windsurfing regatta.
That sounds about right for Italy.
Yeah. Now, I had no idea what a regatta was. I still kind of don't, but it definitely involves a lot of like yuppies in the water, like the sweater set. And I don't know if it's intentionally campy or not, actually. I really can't tell. And so I think that's ideal, that kind of glorious gray area where it's like, who knows if they meant this to be funny, but it definitely is. And it has some stylistic flourishes, like the occasional shot inexplicably set up to capture some action in the ocean through the rear window of a random car in the parking lot of the beach. So it seems to me like definitely at least the cinematographer, if not the director, had some like art aspirations here, but they were dealing with this really schlocky material. So to me, it's this beautiful combination of kind of artsy and super trashy at the same time. So
sounds great.
It really is. And yeah, best of all, the shark is just feasting on yuppies the entire time. Yuppies, the other white meat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're just like casually rich, I think. I like to call it cash money. And who doesn't
Of course
want
their meat tastes the best.
to watch that? Exactly. Yeah, they've got the best diet, like probably. Yeah, they're organic, free-range humans. So it's kind of satisfying if you're an anti-capitalist, similar to the recent Jurassic World sequel. Like those dinos, the shark basically takes the dictum to eat the rich, literally.
Nice.
And I'm kind of down with that. Anyway, so basically it's visually interesting and over-the-top silly at the same time. So pretty great. The other film I want to recommend is Jaws: The Revenge from 1987, which is the 4th installment in the Jaws franchise, and it's just patently ridiculous. It's also a Christmas movie, so you could maybe save that one for December. All I'm going to share in like 2 sentences is the premise. It begins with a pretty epic scene in which the same shark, maybe, who Roy Scheider as Chief Martin Brody had fought in the original Jaws, which you may recall was blown to pieces. So it's either that shark that's somehow still alive or has an enraged offspring or something. It's like never really clear. But anyway, it kills his son, who is now a cop on the same island. So the widow and now grieving mother becomes convinced that the shark is out for revenge for whatever reason. So, oddly enough, she's right. Like, it's not just that she's hysterical. They all go to the Bahamas for Christmas, like she, her remaining son, and his wife, to get away from it. And somehow the shark knows that, follows them all the way down there, and starts killing people off.
Why not go on vacation to the Alps, you know? Like, you don't have to...
True.
Right?
I mean, there was whatever reason, but yeah, I mean, conveniently enough, they went to another ocean locale. And yeah, the shark somehow knew it, came down there to like hunt down the remaining son of old Martin Brody. Anyway, it also features Michael Caine as an aging lech and Mario Van Peebles as a Bahamian with a Jamaican accent. So there's also that.
I do remember this movie pretty well.
Yeah?
Yeah, this is the one I watched for whatever reason more than any of the other ones because it came out in '87.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's way more fun than the second and third one too. It just kind of goes for it, you know, full crazy. But anyway, I think before we end, I want to take a second to talk about something we might call the Jaws effect. Because unfortunately, shark movies have had a tendency to encourage fear of these sharks that actually has deadly consequences for them. Peter Benchley, who wrote Jaws, actually devoted most of his life after that to ocean conservation and specifically to demystifying and protecting sharks because he felt so guilty that the novel and especially the film, that of course became hugely popular, had created this idea that sharks were not only bloodthirsty but vengeful, you know? So other films that followed in its tracks, like Grizzly and Orca, kind of did the same thing for grizzlies and orcas, respectively. And researchers have been able to demonstrate that fear of sharks did rise following Jaws' release, and that shark populations have rapidly declined ever since. Dozens of shark hunt tournaments popped up after the release of Jaws, and nobody felt bad about killing them because they were just seen as these vicious man-eaters. And, you know, I at least definitely don't want our stories to have the same effect. So I want to point out that sharks actually have so much more to fear from us than we have to fear from them. In the waters off the U.S. eastern seaboard, populations of many species of sharks have dropped by 50%, and some have fallen by as much as 90% in the last few decades. And this is due to some pretty horrific practices like finning, in which fishermen will catch a shark, slice off its dorsal and side fins, and then throw the rest of the shark back in the water because the fins are worth like $1,000 a pound, and the rest of the meat would only be like $2 a pound. So the sharks die a painful death, all to get these fins for shark fin soup, but maybe the saddest part is that the fins don't even taste like anything. They're flavorless. The custom of eating shark fin soup dates back to the Ming Dynasty in China, starting in roughly the 14th century, because back then it was a dish only for the emperor, and it was this very clear status symbol. And even now, being able to eat shark fin soup is one way to kind of demonstrate that you've made it. So, yeah, one of many ways that socioeconomic inequality leads to environmental degradation. Fuck capitalism.
Yeah.
So, shark researchers, like I said, have specifically argued that movies like Jaws have led to these declines by making it sexy to go catch sharks. But the reality is that while sharks kill roughly 10 people per year all over the world, humans kill 100 million sharks every year. So literally cows kill more people than sharks do. And if you compare the deadliest animals, what's your guess for the deadliest?
The deadliest animal? I don't know. Maybe like a predator, right? Like a tiger? I mean, no, probably not.
It's actually mosquitoes.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I guess that's
They're
kind of
vectors.
like... Yeah, exactly. They carry diseases. But that doesn't make for great cinema. So,
It could.
Oh, that's true. Maybe we should make that movie.
Yeah.
Christopher Neff, who's a lecturer in public policy at the University of Sydney, calls this the Jaws effect. He uses that to describe the way animal attack films can convince people that certain animals are a lot more dangerous to us than they actually are, which in turn encourages people to go hunt them down. And he argues that the anti-science myths propagated by Jaws are affecting real-world policies. So, for instance, in Western Australia, governmental policies permit the killing of sharks without any sort of reason. You don't have to use them for meat or anything. And he says that has led to the unnecessary killing of millions of sharks. And this has devastating effects on the ecosystem without improving beach safety in any way. They, like other apex predators on land, are keystone species. So they keep their ecosystems healthy.
Yeah.
And we can talk more about this next time. But if you kill off too many sharks, coral reefs suffer and die out, and then the fish that survive by feeding off the coral dies out as well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's partly responsible for the overfishing that could lead to, maybe even in our lifetimes, the fish we like to eat no longer being available.
Yeah. Won't be a viable option anymore.
Yeah, so movies can be dangerous if they're not accompanied by some sort of context and education. But the thing I do love about all these animal attack movies, because that's the thing, like, I know all of that makes me really sad. I don't want all these sharks to die because of Jaws, but I love the kind of primal anxieties that they engage with. I think these movies allow us to think about how we're the only known species that, as part of our evolutionary history, transformed from prey to predator, and indeed to top predator. We've hunted grizzlies to extinction in all but 4 states in the contiguous U.S. Even though, you know, the grizzly is our state animal here in California, it doesn't live anywhere outside of zoos here because we killed them all off over a century ago. So it's depressing. But, you know, I think people have a lot of ambivalence about that, especially if you know anything about the histories of how, like, colonialist and imperialist and misogynist attitudes have all contributed to this. You know, we have this idea that there's a split between nature and humans, between body and mind or spirit.
Right.
And that really comes from these Judeo-Christian traditions, and it's a gendered split as well. You know, the land, we talk about Mother Earth, we talk about virgin land, and then once it's been colonized, we talk about fatherlands. And so there's this way in which our nation's history has, in the stories we like to tell ourselves, is that it's a history of taming, this dangerous wilderness, but actually I think we've just been working towards our own demise a little bit at a time. So I think it's possible to be an animal lover who's aware of that and to love animal attack movies, because even if you know that ideologically they're kind of fucked up, they still give you most of the film in which what you're actually watching is a shark eating yuppies, for instance.
Yeah.
And, so you can get a little of that eat the rich feeling from that. So I appreciate that they dramatize those anxieties about being the top predator and having wiped out these majestic species. Personally, I always want woods full of bears and oceans full of sharks, and I really think we won't survive if that ceases to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we came to be. So if we continue down this track, then, we won't have a place to be anymore.
Yeah.
It just won't happen.
So I want everyone to remember that your chances of being attacked by a shark are basically nil. You're more likely to be struck by lightning. So don't be afraid to get out in the water and enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I'd like to end with our first listener story. No one has shared any personal shark attack stories with us so far. I am aware of one. Actually, a friend of mine, his friends, a couple, were killed by a shark while sea kayaking.
Whoa.
But he told me that years ago, and I'm not going to just tell the story without his permission, and I would understand if he doesn't feel like telling it in this context. So I hope that others will send us some listener stories. If you've been attacked by an animal or anyone you know has, please send them our way. We'd love to hear them at whenanimalsattackpod@gmail.com. You can also DM us, and we'd love it if you follow us on Instagram at whenanimalsattackpodcast and Twitter at animalattackpod. We'll be sharing pics, videos, and links relevant to our episodes, so you can check all that out on social media. But for now, until next time, stay safe out there.
And don't feed the sharks.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow!